Ray, I suspect this is going to be the longest 5 minutes of my life. You want to talk about football, I want to talk about the movies, and I'm first. I just think it's incredible that you were working with as normal as you are, sort of, with people like Jack Nicholson and Anthony Hopkins and directors like Spielberg and Scorsese. Are they ordinary people?
Well, I've done a film called Last Orders when I was young. Before I've worked with some really good people, and I worked with David Hemmings and Michael Caine and Hoskins and Tom Courtenay and Adam Mirren. And the first thing you think about is that's fantastic. I've been watching them since I was a kid, you know. And then a fear comes in because you want them to live up to your expectations. You want them to be really good people. And I must say they were fabulous. And the best times I've ever had were sitting in this car, because it was all about a journey to Margate and listening to the stories, not film stories, but just stories about people's lives and having a laugh with them. So when you realise when you end up working with, when you go and turn up to do a day's work with Jack Nicholson or DiCaprio or whoever it is, that they're just kids who go to work or people who go to work and like what you do, like what I do, like if you've got to drive a cab, you know, everyone's got to be kind of looked at for the job that they do, you know, and you've got to enjoy that. So I've been pretty lucky in that way that I had a good blood in with the Michael Caines and the Bob Hoskins and all that, who are, to me, are the biggest stars that you'll ever meet in your life, you know.
And yet you still a fan, or still a fan of West Ham, and of people like him. Who,
yeah, what about when you meet your footballing heroes?
There's none here, is there? Do you know he got nicked once? Tony got nicked for breaking into a £1 note. And he was, honestly, he was let off because it was his first offence. Yeah. Well, actually, Les is an hero of mine because he missed the 75 final, you know, and he's still wearing the suit. But yeah, like that's my era, you know, the Alan Davidsons, the Tony Galls, the Jeff Hurst, the Bobby Moores, and I was lucky enough to meet and play against Bobby Moore at Wembley, but and meet him after when he was very ill. I mean, that was a man to me who was, if I had any heroes, it was Bobby Moore, because everyone talks about the East End and being full of gangsters and all that. It's all we're famous for, and then all of a sudden you come across a man like Bobby Moore, who actually done more for the East End. Forget about the football, but the image of the East End of a gentleman. And I think I'm very proud to have met him and to have known him. And that goes for, all jokes aside, Tony, yourself, right? No, but seriously, and because when I was a kid growing up, they're the players we used to go and watch, you know, the Paul Goddards, the Little Allens.
But going back to Moro, he was footballing royalty, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, but he earned that right, I think, you know. And I remember when he died, and they had the on the gates, the flowers on the gates outside Upton Park. And I was driving towards the ground to go and have a look at it. And I turned round, I went home, and I thought, I don't want to see that. I want to remember him as he was. It's everybody's kind of choice in a way, you know. But to me, it was more than just the football with Bobby Moore. You know, they say a player is not bigger than a club. I remember when he played for Fulham in the final, and I wouldn't have minded getting beat that day by Fulham, purely because it was Bobby Moore playing for Fulham. And that's no disrespect to Fulham, but I think if there was anyone ever bigger than the club, then and without trying to be bigger than the club, it probably was Bobby Moore, you know.
Talking about the FA Cup, West Ham were back in the Cup in '91 and were that close to getting to the final when there was a very controversial incident involving someone in very tight shorts getting himself sent off.
Yeah, he did, and I don't think he was intelligent enough to bring the guy down on purpose. But if you see that, I mean, we played a fabulous Nottingham Forest side at the time. Brian Clough, I remember the day really well, you know, and the reaction of the supporters at the end when they were cheering Clough. They were actually clapping Clough, and it was a kind of little party. I'm sure there was a few rows outside the ground after. But we lost to an absolutely fabulous Forest side who got beat by Tottenham in the final, if I remember rightly. But it was kind of half a liberty. He was the last man, but the centre forward done exactly what a centre forward should do. He went across the defender, you know, and kind of went across Tony's path, and it was a gutter for him to be sent off. It was a gutter for us because we all wanted to kill him at the time. But
what do you know about football anyway?
Well, a little bit more than you, that's for sure. Because if you're going to get sent off, at least hit him.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Tony, thanks for being so
Loved
quiet.
it. Thank you
Less
very
strong,
much.
you were fantastic as ever. But do stay with us, all of you, because coming up in part 2, we meet John Dempsey, someone who's given over 40 years of his life to putting something back. We'll see you then.